Last year's iPhone X changed what it meant for an iPhone to be an iPhone. Home buttons, fingerprint sensors, bezels, who needs those? In fact, the changes we got last year were so monumental that reviewing these things, the iPhone XS and XS Max, almost feel anticlimactic. I mean, after all, aside from getting a bigger model, this year is mostly about polish. That's definitely not a bad thing. The XS and XS Max are excellent phones, and they honestly represent Apple at the top of its hardware game. That said, you might want to hold off on buying either one, for now anyway. Let's take a closer look. There's a lot to dig into here, so let's start with the most obvious change, the design. I'm gonna put the XS down for a bit because aside from some minute changes, this thing looks just like the iPhone we got last year. It even uses the exact same 5.8-inch OLED screen, which I'm totally fine with. I loved the iPhone X screen, and it holds up just as well now in this kind of new body. Still, there is no way to tell the XS from the X aside from this neat gold finish. That might not sound thrilling, but after using the X for nearly a year, this is the design I'd probably recommend for most people. The iPhone XS Max is a different story. I mean, just look at it. Its 6.5-inch screen is massive. This is the biggest Apple has ever used for a smartphone, and it even edges out Samsung's Galaxy Note 9 by a fraction of an inch. The upshot to this huge Super Retina screen is that videos, especially ones shot in HDR, look phenomenal. And since the screen is so damn big, certain apps and websites show you more information at once. Check this out. The New York Times website will only show you one column at a time on the XS, but on the Max, 3. Not bad. And if you're, using Apple's Mail or Messages apps in landscape mode, you'll see an extra pane with conversation threads. Here's the thing though, a screen this big should be able to do more. Android phones and iPads have been able to run apps in split screen mode for a while now, and I could definitely see that being helpful here. And after searching through just about every app I've installed on the Max, hardly any of them have been optimized to use this extra space well. That should change over time, but for now, the Max isn't dramatically better at helping you be productive than the XS, it's just bigger. Oh, and as a result, you're probably going to have some trouble reaching the top of the screen unless you have massive hands. Apple's reachability feature is still here, and it makes it easier to access those faraway icons, but I've just had to get used to shimmying my hand up and down the phone a lot. Apart from this really obvious difference, the XS and XS Max are basically the same phone. Both have improved stereo speakers, which give you more of a sense of space when you're watching movies or listening to live recordings. Both have eSIMs inside, which you can't actually use yet. When Apple activates them, though, you can attach multiple lines of service to a single device. And both iPhones offer up to 512 gigs of storage, which is, well, frankly, it's a little obscene. The computer I wrote this review on has the same amount of storage space, and I haven't even filled that up yet, so it would take months of effort to use up all the room on these things. Both XS models ship with iOS 12, which in my experience is the most pleasant version of Apple's mobile operating system I've used in a long time. I won't dig into every new feature here because we have a full review on Engadget.com you should check out, but here are some highlights. Notifications are finally intelligently bundled, so you don't have to sift through a sea of alerts anymore. Screen time gives you the information and the tools you need to combat smartphone addiction. If you want to, I guess. And in a nod to power users, you can whip up helpful shortcuts to help you get more done faster, assuming you want to put in the time and really figure out the process. Oh, and Memoji are here too, in case you want to wear your face on your face. The similarities between the XS and the XS Max don't end there, but pay attention because these two are the most important changes you'll find here. Inside both of these phones is Apple's new A12 Bionic chipset, and in terms of architecture, it's a huge step forward from the A11 that we got last year. That said, you might not notice much of a difference if you're coming from an iPhone X. Apple says the A12's 2 performance cores are up to 15% faster, and yeah, that's a pretty modest increase. Apps launch and load a little faster on the XS than they did on the X, and multitasking is a little smoother, but none of this is really earth-shattering. Games like Fortnite seem to run slightly better though, thanks to big improvements in GPU performance. Apple says it's something like 50% faster than last year. The Neural Engine is where Apple did most of its work. This year, it's an octa-core coprocessor that can handle up to 5 trillion operations per second. That means the XS can handle a lot of complicated learning models. On these phones, the Neural Engine helps Face ID recognize you and unlock a little faster. It makes sure augmented reality apps can track objects better, and a whole lot more. I haven't seen a ton of developers work machine learning models into their apps so far, but it's only a matter of time, and the Neural Engine just might be the iPhone XS's unsung hero. The last crucial things the XS and XS Max share are its cameras. Apple introduced a brand new 12 megapixel wide-angle sensor here alongside a 12 megapixel telephoto camera around the back. And I'll just be blunt, these are easily the best cameras Apple has ever squeezed into a smartphone. The new on-by-default Smart HDR mode is a huge help too. It stitches together 4 different exposures in an instant, so the XS is capable of churning out photos with surprising detail and dynamic range. The camera experience isn't perfect though. Even with the help of the neural engine, portrait mode still sometimes makes weird decisions about what's in the foreground and what's not. And a new feature called depth control lets you fiddle with a virtual aperture dial once you've already taken a photo, but the way that it manipulates a shot's depth of field just kind of seems weird sometimes. At least you can use both these features with the front-facing camera now. If we got these cameras last year, I probably would have gushed about them. Here's the thing though, the competition is just so strong. The Pixel 2s are more aggressive in their image processing, but that ultimately means you get more pleasant shots without any effort. And while it isn't as great at exposing all parts of a scene right out of the box, the Galaxy Note 9's photos are still stunning, especially on that huge Super AMOLED display. Which camera takes the best photos is still largely a matter of opinion, and I'm not convinced Apple gets the camera crown this year, but at least it's a tight race. Then again, I guess we'll see what happens when Google unveils its new Pixels soon. So yeah, at the end of the day, these are the best iPhones Apple has ever made. Does that mean you should go out and drop $1,000 on one of them? Well, if you're currently using an iPhone X, you can easily skip out on this generation and not feel too bad about it. Once you've installed iOS 12, you really aren't missing out on that much. If you're coming from an older iPhone or mulling a switch from Android or even buying your first smartphone, you should probably consider waiting until the iPhone XR launches later this year. You might still find that the XS or the XS Max is the way to go, but until we have a better understanding of what that cheap iPhone X brings to the table, we just don't have all the context we need yet.